Glad that you could join us. I'll introduce myself. I'm Christina Maes Nino. I am the Executive Director of the Manitoba Nonprofit Housing Association. So not everyone is a member of MNPHA, but you are welcome to become a member of MNPHA. We're a membership-based association of nonprofit housing organizations and those who support the sector of nonprofit housing providers. And we provide support through education, capacity development, networking, partnership development, and advocacy. A few things coming up to keep an eye out for from MNPHA is that we have a new housing professionals program. It's for folks who are new to the sector within the past 5 years to be able to attend all MNPHA events over the next year complimentary. So it's sponsored by the Assiniboine Credit Union, and it allows folks who are new to the sector to get immersed in the sector, to meet each other, to network. So there's details on that on our website. We're also planning an education day in mid-October, October 18th. So if you get our newsletter, you'll see details on that. And if you don't get our newsletter, you can sign up for our newsletter if you go to MNPHA.com. Finally, there is an election coming up in October, and we know that nonprofit housing is a solution to many of the challenges that Manitoba is dealing with and wanting to address in this election. We know that poverty and homelessness are key issues for Manitobans, and that nonprofit housing is the solution to those challenges. So we're going to be collecting success stories on nonprofit housing throughout the summer and providing resources and tools on how you can educate candidates and constituents about nonprofit housing. So keep an eye out for that as well. All right, so today's session, a couple of technical things for folks who are maybe new to Zoom or out of practice with Zoom. You are muted and your video was off when you first joined. You are very welcome to turn your video on or leave it off. It's up to you. Do keep yourself muted until we get to the question period. We will have questions at the end of the session. So you can enter your question in the chat box if you want so that you don't forget it, or you can write it down so you don't forget it and then ask it at the end, and I'll moderate those questions. We will have Lido presenting. So I'm sure everyone in Manitoba who has an operating agreement will know Lido, but maybe not. So Pablito Agasino is the Executive Director of Portfolio Management. Is that your title, Lido? Yes, he's giving me a thumbs up. And he's joining us today to provide the presentation. If you have any technical issues, questions, anything like that, don't hesitate to use the chat box. You can also introduce yourself in the chat box. You're very welcome to chat with each other, say hi. We know that a lot of the benefits of being part of MNPHA is that network. So feel free to introduce yourself so that everyone knows who's here. And now I will turn it over to Lido. You can take it away.
Great. Took me a while to find that unmute button there. Good morning, everyone. Again, as Christina mentioned, my name is Pablito Agasino, and I am the Executive Director for Portfolio Management in Manitoba Housing. So this morning, folks, I'm going to be giving you guys an information about this proposed new block funding model from Manitoba Housing. And this new block funding model is related to address the issues about the end of operating agreement. So I will continue on with my PowerPoint presentation, and I am hoping that everyone is seeing my my screen right now. So we're good. All right. Oh, there you go. So I'm going to be talking about this proposed new funding model, which will be delivered by Portfolio Management. So on May 10th, the minister made this announcement during a housing day that there is a new funding model that's coming around that will be implemented by Manitoba Housing. And this new funding model will address the issues about the expired and expiring agreements. So under this model, technically it has not been approved yet, but for now, though, for this current fiscal year, we've been given the green light, the allocation of up to 1.4 million to actually distribute within this fiscal year 23-24. And then also, depending on the uptake, there will be additional funding that will be coming in the future years. So the intent right now is for Manitoba Housing to actually reach out to the nonprofit housing sector, to you folks. And that's why we're also doing this webinar, so that everybody will be aware of this proposed new block funding model, and so that we can also sort of like do a survey, canvass the sector's interest into this new block funding model. Because at the end of the day, we need to get back to Treasury Board and indicate to Treasury Board that, hey, Treasury Board, based on our survey, there's a lot of interest coming from the sector, and could you please provide us approval to go ahead with this new block funding model? So what is this new model of providing subsidy? Well, this new kid on the block is the block funding model. So what is block funding? So block funding is a model of delivering subsidy assistance to nonprofit housing providers based on a fixed annual amount. It will be paid monthly to the nonprofit housing organization to assist with cash flow, and the amount that will be provided to a specific nonprofit housing provider will be determined by Manitoba Housing using our assessment tools. So this model is a good model. Why? Because it allows nonprofit housing providers to proactively implement, the social and affordable housing programs to meet the housing needs of their respective communities. So the nonprofit housing providers will benefit from the ability to be able to align their operational decisions and service delivery more closely with their financial budget and the funding that will be provided by Manitoba Housing. So this funding provides predictability, flexibility, and over the next years, as opposed to just receiving funds based on your annual operating outcomes or subsidy advances and or complicated formulas to calculate subsidy. So with this new model, this reduces red tape and administrative burden to the nonprofit housing providers, and really helps to focus resources to where they are needed the most, and gives nonprofit housing providers with more decision-making authority. And in addition, the block funding offers a more efficient and predictable funding system for the government. So what is Manitoba Housing's responsibility under this new proposed block funding? Under the block funding model, Manitoba Housing will determine the overall annual budget for the entire nonprofit housing sector, and will continue to have oversight and accountability. Manitoba Housing will be responsible for assessing and allocating funding to each nonprofit housing partner who will enter into an agreement with Manitoba Housing. So again, I just want to underscore that this new funding model is for each nonprofit housing provider, includes support for your operations, staffing, and annual allocation to the replacement reserve fund. And in addition, this funding model is more responsive to local needs of each nonprofit housing provider. So what are the responsibilities of the nonprofit housing providers under this new block funding model? So the nonprofit housing providers are to maintain their units under the social and or affordable housing program, depending on which program you belong to, because there are groups here who are implementing the 100% RGI model, which we call the social housing program. And there are other groups here who, when their agreement expired, were implementing the low end of market rental rates in their projects, which would fall under the affordable housing program. So nonprofit housing providers are going to be responsible for managing the funds allocated to their organization, and they will be able to retain any operational surplus or savings either for reinvestment or allocation to their replacement reserve fund. Under this new model, the nonprofit housing providers benefit from their ability to align their operational decisions, and again, the service delivery more closely with their budget and the funding being provided by Manitoba Housing. Again, this is predictable funding with flexibility and Of course, regular reviews will help the nonprofit housing providers to create efficiencies and operations and allocate funding where it is needed most. It also reduces, again, red tape and other administrative burdens and supports a closer relationship between Manitoba Housing, the nonprofit housing providers, and the community that we all serve. So how and where to use the block funding? Well, you can use it to subsidize rents. You can use it for your operations to fund your administration and or your maintenance costs. You can use it to allocate it to your replacement reserve fund. You can use it to, for your capital upgrades and or replacement. Or if you're one of those projects that will be coming up agreement and are, thinking about refinancing, definitely you can use the block funding for your debt service. So I guess the question is, how is funding going to be determined for each nonprofit housing providers? So allocations will consider the following. So we will be looking at your prior year's expenditures. So most of you with active agreements right now, we do have, your audited financial statements, your history of your revenue and expenses. For those ones that have already expired, of course, we are going to have that conversation with you, and we will be requesting some financial information from you folks. And also, of course, once we do the assessment, also once we have the financial information, we're going to take into consideration anticipated additional costs such as inflation, or if you have, financing that that you are contemplating on doing. And of course, we're also going to be looking at your annual replacement reserve fund allocation, and as I've already mentioned, debt service if applicable. What do we expect from this new funding model? Well, the target outcomes include the following. Well, number one, maintain, which is the most important, maintain the stock of affordable and social housing. And then number two, implement or effect efficiency in project operations. And then number three, build up the replacement reserve fund of our nonprofit housing partners. And then this is probably the most important, is strengthen the nonprofit housing sector. And that, folks, takes me to the end of my presentation. And thank you. Thank you very much.
So just to facilitate this, there's more than one screen because of the number of participants. So if you have a question, you can either put it in the chat box and then I'll call you, call on you, and you can unmute and ask your question. Or you can put your hand up. There's a hand feature at the bottom. I think everyone has the same view as me. It should be at the bottom of your screen. Sometimes, depending on how it's set up, there might be a more or something like that. And you can go to reactions and you can put your hand up. James and Eva have figured this out. And if you can't figure that out, it totally understand. Just, you can like wave furiously. I don't know if I'll see you, or you can put it in the chat box and I'll call. That's probably the easiest way. So James, you're up.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Lito. Probably question that I'm asking or that I'm wondering about is the 1.4 million. I know that they're going to continue to look at that, but correct me if I'm wrong, Lito, the 1.4 million, if somebody signed into that or signed up with that or made an agreement with housing, that is for a 5-year period until the end of the National Housing Strategy. Is that correct?
That is correct, James.
Okay, so that was my first question. So the other question that I have is, I put it in the chat already, is the assessment tool. I know that Carolyn said that she wasn't going to share the assessment tool, but is that something that housing is going to do yet?
No, sorry, James, we're not going to be sharing the assessment tool. It's an internal document, but I can give you an idea what it contains. Basically, we're looking at the different aspects of the projects. We're looking at location. We're looking at their operations, their financials. We're looking at vacancies. We're looking at the type of clientele that the nonprofit housing provider is serving. we're looking at their replacement reserve fund allocation, and not just the allocation, but also the balance of their replacement reserve fund. And if we have, their capital plan, submitted to us or on file, that's also something that we're going to be looking at. If there's none, we might ask for a copy of your capital plan. So those are the things that we're looking for.
Okay, one final comment. Just looking at our portfolio, we have 182 units that are either off of operating agreement or coming off of operating agreement. If I do the calculations on 1.4 million, divide that by the 182 units would give me $7,692 per unit. And if I do that over a 60-month period, and all of our units are rent geared to income, I would have a supplement of $128 per month approximately over the next 5 years for that. That doesn't include the almost $8 million that I require in renovations and upgrades to the units, because you do say quite often in your presentation that we need to maintain the units, and I think all of us know, quite literally that the budgets that we have, the repairs and maintenance and the amount that goes to reserves doesn't keep up with what our needs are. So how is Manitoba Housing going to address that?
Well, again, like the 1.4 million is just for this year alone. And I know I don't want to get into the specifics of the calculation and all that, because I don't have that in front of me, and I don't have a copy of the spreadsheets and all that. But definitely that's something that, say for example, once we enter into negotiation, James, that's definitely something that we're going to be drilling down on, and, we'll be discussing that. But I'm going to, again, stick to what we're saying, and which is, the intent of this new block funding model is, again, to, enhance the capacity of the nonprofit housing sector and, our partner, by ensuring that they will be able to, build up on their replacement reserve fund, that they will have enough subsidy that, like what you said, those increasing costs on your repairs and maintenance, including admin costs, will be covered, and will be, that this financial assistance will be able to help in maintaining the operations of the project.
Thank you.
I'll give a sort of a non, because this is being recorded, I'll chime in here and say we need to prove how much this is going to cost to government, and so that's part of the application, and I think will be part of MNPHA's role in advocacy to say that we recognize that 1.4 million is clearly not going to be sufficient, and to help to make the case as to what would be sufficient. But I'll turn that over. The next question is Eva, and then I saw a question from Doug, and then David. So Eva, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. Nice to see you again, Lido. And I guess James, kind of the same situation with us. We've been off our operating agreement for a while, and we have some major renovations and stuff. So certainly if you want to share your information, James, I'd love to have a conversation with you. But with regards to the funding, we at Spruce Woods are very excited about it. It's giving us a bit of hope that, we'll be able to continue to maintain our affordability. And I know I kind of brought this question up in a meeting with yourself, Lido, but with the funding, right now, we're working with all of our members to put them, onto rent assist. It's been a very slow process for some of our people, and I guess the question, if we were to receive funding through this model, are we looking at being able to maintain and keep our members on rent assist, or is that kind of, we would have to take them off and provide subsidy, or is that kind of still up in the air?
If I remember correctly, Eva, the last time we had this conversation, my response to you was that most likely those folks are not going to be eligible for rent assist anymore, because we do have this system in government that if you are a subsidized project, then definitely the tenants there are not going to be eligible for rent assist. But then again, like what I said, I'm gonna put a little bit of I guess a caveat to that also. We still have to look at the finer details, right? Because again, that's why we're having this conversation, and that's why we're doing this webinar, so that, we get all these questions, and if we don't have the answers to these types of questions, we can, go and look at, how do we address these things right now. But definitely, we should continue that conversation.
Yeah, no, perfect. And then I guess the other question is kind of a guesstimate as to, we've kind of started that conversation, right? And so, a guesstimate of a time period would you have? Like if we, if we say, okay, we're going to do this and we go through the assessment, like what kind of a time frame are we looking at?
So basically, the sooner the better, I guess.
Yep. Yes. Yeah, you just send it to us.
I'm gonna give you though an idea of how we're prioritizing this. So right now we're prioritizing those that are expiring this year, and those are those ones that are 100% RGI. So we're prioritizing those types of projects, and definitely next in line would be those ones that have already expired, and those ones that have already reached out to us, and we're having the conversation and looking at people's or the individual projects financial needs. So depending on where you guys are going to be at, so you are probably going to be next in line. But definitely for now, we're focusing on those ones that are expiring right now, and those ones that are providing 100% RGI, because those ones are going to be at real risk.
Okay.
I'm not saying you guys are not important. You guys are very important. It's just that, we don't have all the time in the world, and I don't have all the staff in the world to be able to do all these all at the same time.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Eva. Excellent questions. I see there's a somewhat similar question, so maybe I'll skip to that one about just to confirm whether or not Manitoba Housing will reach out to them or they need to initiate contact. So, Lito, what is the process of applying and getting the information for this, if groups are indeed interested?
We are, if you guys, because everybody's here, well, I'm not saying everybody, but if you've heard about this and you know that this is happening and you have not been contacted by us, then, I would definitely suggest, you connect with us and let us know that you guys are interested. Like what I said, there's so many of you and just so much of us here, but definitely if you're one of those post 85 project that is going to be expiring within this fiscal year or the next fiscal year, you're definitely on our radar. If you're one of those Section 95 and Section 2627s that have expired in the last 5 years or so, you guys are also on our radar. We will be reaching out to you, but definitely it takes time for us to get to everybody. But if you want to give us a call, if you want to contact us, feel free to do so.
Excellent. And Doug has asked about documented eligibility and if there's a sample agreement available.
Documented eligibility, I'm assuming, Doug, you're asking me about the program eligibility. Yes, that will still apply with this new block funding model. Is there a sample agreement? No, I don't have one yet that I can share, but definitely if I have one, that it's still going through the approval process right now. So once that, once we get the green light, and we also get the green light from from the government that we're going to be getting the funding next year, and the green light also for the new funding model. I'm not just talking about the 1.4 for this year, but for the future years. I think that this is something that we can share with you folks, so everybody gets an idea, the finer details.
Doug, did that answer your questions? Do you have other? You're muted. I think. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I'm just kind of trying to absorb the information and assess. I mean, we've got about 40 clients with about 1,700 homes that are all desperate in need of cash because the capital reserves have been underfunded for years. That's one little thing. We've tried to, we're working with our clients to try and restructure the rent rolls so that we deal with the anomaly of coming off the agreement there and the legalities. However, the 1.4 million, I was kind of sad to hear that's, I thought that might be per project. So I was kind of sad to hear that's for the entire community to scrabble over and, you know, compete against each other. I guess priority-wise, Lito, you've shared that the Section 56(1) deep subsidies that are coming off this year are your highest priority. So it would seem like you'll probably get significantly more requests than for 1.4 million. And Christina, if I was hearing you right, you're kind of saying this is kind of a form of a survey of the community to see what the need is there. So that's telling me there's our clients should indicate their interest in participating. All the clients, the whole community should, in order to, you know, give Manitoba Housing the ammunition to go to the government and lobby and say, look, 1.4 million does one roof on one project. We've got 30,000 roofs out there, so you guys need to crank it up a bit. Yeah, and just on the, I guess it's been thrown at Lito and Orlando, so and I don't think there's any planning department there anymore, correct me if I'm wrong, but so the delivery model, there's no delivery model really. You guys are, yeah, it's just an announcement and then see what happens. So that kind of answers my questions. You know, CMHC on the National Housing, the co-investment fund, you know, there's a big algorithm. You go through 200 questions and it's all set up there already. But I'm guessing there's nothing like that here. I'm glad that you've prioritized things though, and it will help us like with our clients. We've got a number of clients that have come off just recently, and they're still trying to balance and the I guess proposed model at the time conceptually. It almost works. It certainly is a help, but certainly coming off and having the same. Being able to service the same percentages of core need aren't realistic. That's at least been our experience. So it's just it's an expression of interest then, Lito, that the group should just simply identify expression of interest and identify who they are and what they are. You know, Section 56(1), 2% write down, or an ILM, or a post 85, I guess. That's basically what the application will be. Is there a deadline on the application there?
Doug, there's really no application. For now, what we're trying to do is just, you know, just to try to get a gauge and, you know, a feel out there, you know, what's the interest in the sector on this proposed block funding model.
Okay.
Lito, it's my sense, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but some groups had operating agreements and they said, oh, good, we don't need to offer social housing anymore, and we can do our own thing. And I would say that that's a rarity, but it does exist. And so part of this process is to identify whether or not organizations do indeed want to continue to be a part of providing social housing, following the social housing agreement. And that's where it's a bit of a sort of a test to see what is, if all the organizations in Manitoba want to continue offering social housing. I hope you do. I understand there's some challenges there. then to say this is what we would need for that to happen. Is that?
Yeah, if you sum it up, basically it comes down to that. We're, testing the water here and, trying to see, what has happened to those agreements that have expired. Is there, that need, from the sector to, again, continue providing social housing, or do folks have already turned around and, have changed, their mandate of, instead of providing affordable housing or social housing, they have now gone into, just the regular market rent. So that's the intent also, to see. But at the end of the day, though, we would like to be able to sign up as many, folks as possible. And I just want to go back to the funding. I know folks are always saying 1.4 million is not a lot of money, but again, this is just sort of like, a pilot, see, what's going to happen, what's going to be, again, just to address those few ones that are going to be expiring this year, and see how this thing is going to work. But definitely after this year, though, based on what we are proposing to the government, that funding is going to be a lot higher than that. I would call it, that 1.4 million being just a drop in the bucket.
David, you're up next.
Thank you, Christina. Pablito, similar along the lines of what Christina had just mentioned, and I think what everyone else is discussing, is there's a bit of a lack of detail in what you're rolling out right now. And my questions, I guess they're considered. I guess they circle around block funding itself. I'm a little bit foggy on the notion. Are you funding? I guess you're funding the co-op, not necessarily funding the member, or funding the nonprofit group rather than the member, or are you funding the group through sort of a rent supplement to the member? Is that how that's going to work, or is the group responsible to distribute it?
The way this funding is going to go is, okay, we've done our negotiation. We've looked at your finances. You provided us your information. We've sat down. We've negotiated. And based on that negotiation, here is, say, for example, $1,000. You guys are going to be responsible for that $1,000. And what we're looking for is for you guys to continue providing affordable housing or social housing. So that's why you can use it, any which way you want to use that funding. You can put it in your replacement reserve fund, or if you have, an ongoing debt service, you can use that for your debt service. Yes.
Okay. And so this assessment tool that you're reluctant to disclose at this point, understandably, can you tell me, is there a criteria based on your affordable rates that are posted on your website? Is that one of the criteria?
Yes.
Okay, so what if our rates exceed your posted rates? Would you fund up to, say, your posted rates? Or would we be ineligible for those units?
If your rates are going to be above the posted affordable housing rental rates, then technically those that will make you ineligible.
Okay, and subsequent increases in accordance with the 5-year agreement that you would get us to sign, I'm presuming there would be increases. Would they be in accordance with RTB increases, or is there another threshold?
It will always be based on the posted affordable housing rental rates. Usually, those affordable housing rental rates, they usually go up every year. The only time those affordable housing rental rates did not go up is in the last 2 years, or I think 2 years, the last 2 years, and that has to do with the I guess the rent freeze that was announced.
Right, the RTB increases. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is kind of geared to RTB increases.
I guess in a way, yes. because that's one of those things that we also look at whenever those affordable housing rental rates go up.
Okay. And, okay, so I guess the next question is, when do you think we'd be ready to have some sort of an assessment to see where we would be falling in terms of what type of benefit that our organization could receive under the program?
The way I'm seeing things right now, we need to get back to the government regarding, interest into this new block funding program by next month.
Okay.
Probably we will have a better sense of, where we're going to be at, whether, when we get that approval after July, or probably around August. So I'm looking at, things sort of like, taking a full steam probably after the election.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean we're going to stop contacting people, though. We, the discussion will continue even during the election.
Thank you, Pablito.
Thank you, sir.
I'll ask a question. It's somewhat related to the question that David was asking, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this yet, but Manitoba Housing announced a number of rent supplements tied to the homelessness strategy, and has announced this block funding model. And I imagine that some organizations might be thinking, should we be considering applying for rent supplements, or should we be considering applying for the block funding? What are the pros and cons of each? What's the process of each, etc. Do you have, if groups approach you, is there a way in which you would sort of talk through what's going to work best for the organization, or how are you dealing with those two different streams of funding?
Well, technically, this new block funding model is geared towards those groups who have operating agreements with us, and those agreements that have already expired, and those agreements that are going to be that will be expiring. So usually those types of agreements, they do not have a rent supplement component. So basically what I'm saying here is that this is tailored towards those ones with operating agreements with us. Whereas the homelessness 400 rent supplement units, that's a different program that's not tied into this new block funding model. Most likely, those groups, organizations that are going to be applying for the rent supplement for the 400, they probably do not have an operating agreement with us, or if they did and they're contemplating on, applying for, that initiative as well, we can definitely sit down and we can, discuss, the pros and cons between, the two.
Right, thanks, Lito. I see Maria, and then I saw Eva, and then a question in the chat box, and then James. Maria?
Much, Christina. I want to echo those sentiments that, the 1.4 million certainly, was just a drop in the bucket of what's needed. However, housing co-ops and affordable housing, I think, are happy to have a seat at that table to start those discussions about partnerships. So thank you for that. I have a few questions. The first would be, is there a one-pager plain language document that would really go into sort of what this program is, what it looks like, that would be really understandable, that I could share with the housing co-ops that are members of our organization?
We do. We do have one. But because technically we do not have an approval yet on this new block funding model, that's why we have not released, that one pager, or actually two pager info, because we don't have that approval yet. Our approval is just for the 1.4 million, sign groups up for the 1.4 million, and then go back to the government and, discuss, is there interest in, within the sector regarding this new block funding model. But yes, we do. And definitely once we're able to share, we will share.
Okay. And then
for now, I encourage you folks to, ask us questions, send us an email, and we will answer those questions, as best as we could.
And then for groups that choose to use the funding to fund their reserves or service debt, will their tenants or members still be eligible for rent assist, or is it one or the other?
I think I answered this question, but once you enter into an agreement with us, you will be considered as a subsidized building or a subsidized project. And once you are a subsidized project, then definitely your members or tenants living in your project most likely will not be eligible for rent assist anymore.
So we're choosing whether or not to subsidize the building or subsidize the people that live there. That's the choice.
I guess you could put it that way, because you can't have, one subsidy here and then the other subsidy here. It would be, sort of like, a double dipping kind of thing. I know it sounds really bad, but that's not what I'm saying. Is you can only have, one set of subsidy, because really at the end of the day, it's coming from just one basket, right? So, yeah.
That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ability to stretch the funds. So that may be something we as a sector would want to reach out to government on. I know we have in the past advocated that buildings with subsidy be eligible for rent assist. So I'll keep that in mind. Eva?
Sorry, just had to unmute. So, I mean, right now we have been following the CMHC rental amounts. And I'm just wondering if you know offhand, Lido, whether they're comparable to the Manitoba Housing ones.
I'm sorry, Eva, what rates are you using again?
We're using the CMHC rates. Like their
CMHC, median market rent, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. So I'm just wondering if they're comparable to Manitoba Housing. If you know offhand, if not, we can look it up.
I do not know. I have not looked recently at their median market rent.
Okay.
But again, when we look at our affordable housing rental rates, we use many, sources of information that includes CMHC's median market rent. Okay. We are also conducting our own survey and then looking at incomes and things like that. So might be, close, or if not, probably the same. But again, I'm qualifying my answer because I do not know.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just thought we can do that and look it up and just see, because we'd hate to be disqualified if we're using the wrong, because we are working with CMHC as well. So yes. Perfect. Thanks, Lido.
But that's why it makes sense for us to sit down and actually have, a one-on-one as well.
No, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I see Jackie asked a question in the chat box. She doesn't have a microphone. So she has suggested to stop asking for such a high surplus at the end of the year, which are impossible to reach, and allow the surplus to enter the reserves. So it's my understanding, Lido, that under this new model, surpluses will be permitted, and it will be up to the organization to decide what to do with that, which could be reserve funding. Is that true?
Yes, they can keep the surplus.
Okay. Jackie,
for for anything that they want to use it for, reinvest it. If they're planning on putting up a new project or something like that, use that as a part of their contribution to that new project. Or if they want to put it into their replacement reserve fund, that's something that they can also do.
All right, James, you're next, and then Justin, and then I saw Doug put another question in that chat box. So James.
Okay, Lido, so going back to what you just said, so if there is a surplus, if we agree upon a process and a new block funding model, if there's a surplus, we get to keep that. If there's a deficit, we're also responsible for it, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so then I've got one other question or maybe comment. And just so that I understand process correctly. So, and so far, I think everything is, I think there's there's an interest in this, but I think there's so many questions. So when I'm looking at the process, government minister makes an announcement of 1.4 million. You're trying to gauge the interest in this. I think there's interest in this. You're supposed to let the government know by the end of June or July that there's an interest. But I guess that's where I get hung up on is, we're interested, but there's so many questions that are unanswered as to what this looks like. We don't know what the assessment tool looks like. We know that the money can be used for a number of different areas, but, and you're looking at only those agreements that expire this year, from what I understand. And there's lots of agreements that have already expired. But I think there's so much unknown yet as to saying, yeah, we're interested, but there's a lot of questions that have to be answered. And I think that's what everybody is kind of looking at right now, going, yes, we're all interested, but what does this really mean? Is it, and when I look at it, and when I report to my board of directors, this has to be something that's good for WHRC, recognizing that it has to be good for MHRC, but we want to ensure that we continue to keep the rent geared to income housing. As you know, the report just came out from, the rental rates and how much people are paying for the rents and stuff like that. And that's what we really need to ensure, is that people aren't going to change over their operating agreements or getting out of operating agreements. So they're getting out of the rent geared to income, because we know that's the most vulnerable person that's just on the edge of homelessness, right? So there's too many questions that have to be answered yet.
I totally agree with you, James. And I, for one, would like to answer all those specific questions, but without an actual approval for us to roll this out yet, because again, at the end of the day, this is still a proposed new funding model. I am not at liberty to, again, things could still change, right? I may have all these ideas in my head, how to answer those questions, or, how to go about those issues that you guys are identifying as, need for information. But I am hoping, that after the election, that we would have more specific information for everyone.
Thanks, Lito. I saw a lot of nodding as James was speaking. I think the partly the devil's in the details, and partly there's this, the devil that we know, which is operating agreements. And I know everyone in this Zoom call knows more intimately than me that the existing operating agreements have all sorts of flaws that this model I can see is attempting to address. However, there are risks with change, and in particular with a 5-year locked-in funding agreement, those risks are putting financial risks on organizations. So it will be really important that we make these decisions well and really advocate for the sector to be strong together. And we're not, as Doug said, we're not all fighting for the smallest scrap. We're actually coming together and saying, this is what we need all together. So that we're not, I know that there's some inherent competition in funding, but this is an opportunity to really make sure that we're saying what the true needs are, so that we can preserve that rent geared to income housing. Justin, you're up next, and then I saw some questions from Doug. Go ahead, Justin.
Thanks. Thanks, Lito, for your presentation and answering all these questions. This has been very helpful. Really appreciate it. I do have a question. As we shift over to this block funding, it's clear across the board, yourself included, that this 1.4 million is only going to take us so far. And so as we shift over, you talked a little bit about the programs that you're interested in sort of prioritizing. I'm also wondering if there's going to be, as part of your assessment on who to prioritize, whether there's going to be any regional implications. Is it going to have an impact whether you're in Winnipeg or a rural community or a northern community? And is there sort of going to be a list based on that? Is that going to have any impact on people applying for it? Because again, I think as we start to roll over and we start making those choices and saying we're reaching the end of our fiscal capacity, is there going to be a process by which we make those decisions according to where you're located in Manitoba?
in terms of, prioritizing, no. All those projects are all important to us. All those projects are a priority to us. The difference will be, of course, when we're doing the assessment in terms of, the funding, because those will be, part of the assessment.
Okay, thank you.
But no, we're reaching out to all.
Ask it because I, as many times as Rod has tried to explain to me the different agreements by number, your comment was block funding targeted to section 56.1 deep subsidy core need only because they're different. Could you help me understand that comment?
Yeah, I guess it's just the kind of similar question that James was eloquently describing there, but basically it's just, definition, like what is this and when is this? Usually, if there's a specific program that gets rolled out, then there's lots of information as to who's eligible, what the priorities are, et cetera, And I guess in this case, Lido and the guys have been given the task of, hey, get it out, and no, there's not enough time to do that. So ultimately, I mean, if we were to put together 40 PDF applications or applications under a proposal call in 1 week, that's kind of impossible. But if we were to send out 40 expressions of interest from our client boards, that every one of them says, yes, we're absolutely dedicated to providing the service to the community. We want to continue it for another 40 years. We're in conceptually, and our particular needs are, capital or subsidy or whatever it is. That is definitely doable. So, but those two kind of items are exceedingly different. So what I'm hearing is it's really more of an expression of interest that Lido's after here. Now, there are specifics for groups that are coming off right now. I mean, I would argue that maybe groups that came off a year or two ago are in greater need because there's no assistance for them there. But anyway, I think just rather than me rambling on here, to be clear, for me, so this what the MHRC are asking for at the moment really is like an expression of interest. And they're saying, look, we've got 1.4. I understand how Lido's hands are tied if there's not been a public announcement yet. So, we've got 1.4. Is anyone interested in spending it? And if you're a section 56.1 deep subsidy core need, you'll be prioritized. So, for our clients, we'll express an interest. I'm hoping this is what you're wanting, Lido. We'll express interests, or I'm sure all my clients will express an interest each. And a couple of them will be section 56 ones that are coming off the agreement next year or this year. So they'll be maybe asking for a little bit more detail. And then hopefully the program will unfold, so to speak, or it sounds like it hasn't really been bureaucratically developed yet in terms of a delivery model. But I think the expression of interest is doable, definitely. And I think it's valuable also for the community. I hope nobody turns away and says, well, what's the point of competing for 1.4 million with the rest of the community? We shouldn't be saying that. We should be saying, hey, let's all express an interest at least that, yes, we're all committed. We want to do it for another 40 years. Go find more money, Lido. And then that gives,
I just want to make a comment. I think folks are getting hung up on that 1.4 million, like what I said, and like how the minister announced it. That 1.4 is only for this fiscal year. So the hope is we generate enough interest from the sector so that we could really get that approval, so we can roll this out and we could get, the additional more funding in the next fiscal year. Again, the 1.4 is just for this, this fiscal year. Again, it's not a lot of money, but that's not what we're shooting for. Our objective is to actually sign up more people and get more funding, not just 1.4.
I guess I'd just like to make another comment, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Lito, or you might not be able to make a comment on it at all. But just the idea of, well, will this replace RS, or will it replace, rent assist? It sounds to me like it's almost, and I might be dreaming, it sounds to me like it's almost like a new deep core subsidy program. So if you're on it, you don't need RS, because the assessment process, you will be assessing income penetration and all of that for the project. And if the project's meeting all of those criteria, then it would be approved. But this is where the 1.4 million is silly. I mean, that's the thing. It's not, that's the word for it. It's just completely silly.
Silly is right.
Because I could use that for one roof, and so that's throwing a curve. Like for me, James, I'm sure Peter, it's like 1.4 million. But I'm glad you said maybe times 100 or 1,000 there would be better. If you multiply the number of social housing units there out in the province. So that I've said enough, I think.
So, Lito, is that a fair sort of summary of how folks should express their interest?
Again, this is not, your formal, expression of interest. What we're trying to just get here is, feedback from the sector. If we hear that, yes, we are interested, again, no commitment at all. We just want to say, yes, we're interested, and we would like to sit down with you in the very near future so we could discuss this in details. That's all we ask.
All right, I see Orlando and then David.
Yeah, I just wanted to give Lito a little break and pipe in a little bit. I agree, folks. Let's not focus on the 1.4 million. I think Doug and Lito both said that, and it's a good point. That's a starting point. We certainly hope that there will be much more coming. And again, like Lito said, we have to be careful what we say. Nothing's been approved. This is a proposal. There is no application. Don't worry about filling out an application or writing out an expression of interest. We are going to reach out to everybody, and we will keep stats saying, yes, this group said yes, they're interested, like Lito said, in having a conversation for us. They want funding. We're not focusing on the 1.4. We're focusing on who wants funding and can we work with them for the future. And we believe, just like I've seen in this conversation here, we believe there's a lot of interest. And that's what we're going to show to the government and say, look, there is a lot of interest. So we, at that point, will be asking for more money, which, just so you know, we've already asked. But we need to show that there is a lot of interest to back up what we want. And we do want to make this something that is, enticing is the wrong word. We want this to be something that will help you. We want to reduce the red tape. We just can't share too much yet. It's a proposal. If you're interested, let us know. We will be reaching out, but if you want to reach out to us, absolutely, we're here. Call us, email us. We want to help.
Thanks, Orlando. That makes sense. And I see Maria's comment here in some ways ties together, is that there's fear in the sector that if there are deeper subsidies available through either rent assist or rent supplements, that there or this sort of not, this unknown might lead to people not wanting to express interest. I think it's important for folks to, it is, it's expressing an interest, and the risk isn't here yet. The risk will be here, and that's something that we'll need to address, certainly. But in the meantime, it is a bit of a unfortunate demonstration to government and more to the political decision makers that there is this ongoing need. And I know I can sort of hear Pete in the back of my head saying, well, surely we've demonstrated this. We've been doing this for 50 years. So I recognize that we've demonstrated it and have to keep demonstrating it, and it's frustrating. And it is the way politics works. I'll turn it over to David and then James. Go ahead, David.
Yeah. Thanks for that information. I really believe I believe what you're saying is this is all very preliminary. I think the expression of interest is there, subject to us having reasonable levels of funding proposals coming forward, something that is sustainable in the 5-year block. I think the worst thing that could potentially happen is that once the assessments are done, which we don't know the full criteria of, once assessments are done and then the subsidy comes in at a really unreasonable level, that would cause havoc in the housing sector. So I think that we literally need to move on the assessments as early as possible so that we understand what we're getting into. Because if not, then we are moving to either market or to a rent assist process. So rather than waiting for the assessments to be done, I think all of the stakeholders here would like to get the ball rolling.
Thanks,
Thank
David.
you for that, David. Yeah.
Go ahead, Lena.
No, I was just saying thank you to David for that comment, and that's exactly what we want to do. We want to the sector to get together and just say yes, we are interested, and yes, we would like to sit down with you and discuss these things in details with you folks, because exactly what we're trying to avoid. We want to be able to sit down, be able to set that subsidy at a fair level that will be acceptable to each and each nonprofit housing providers.
James?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what some of the others said. And I think, Lido, as you know, MNPHA has put together some documents already on costing of many different things, including upgrades or, capital projects within the building, new builds, all of those types of things. Question I have for you though, Lido, is would it help, I think as David already said or alluded to that, we're all interested and we don't want that money to go away. But would it help from your perspective is if all of us provided some ammunition to you on what we're really looking at, like what's a realistic number? Again, the 1.4 million is a start. It's a very small amount, and we hope that there's considerably more. But I know we've already done, and I've already reported to the board or my board of directors on what our costs are going to be and what we're looking for as far as a subsidy goes. If there is a reasonable amount that goes into the repairs and maintenance line, administration lines and things like that. I can provide that very easily, but would it help you going forward or is it too premature to do something like that?
Any additional information coming from the sector would be helpful. At least it's not just coming from us or coming from the individual project, but sort of like a more general picture of the landscape, I guess.
Yeah, because I just commenting on what Doug said earlier on about one roof being 1.4 million. We just did the assessment on our buildings and we're looking at about $58 million in required repairs and maintenance. And that's capital items. That's never mind the units themselves being upgraded. So there's some huge numbers out there, and I think the more information we can give you, the more they need to understand the dire situation that we're all in.
Again, the more information you can provide to us, the better for everyone.
All right, well, we're a bit over the time that we planned, but I also know that this will significantly change how social housing is delivered in Manitoba. And we hope that will be a positive change and have fears that it could not. And so I know this is a really important discussion. As Lido said, it's a preliminary discussion. There's still a lot to work out. I really appreciate you coming out and sharing this. I know not every province is doing this. There are some provinces that are just, pretending nothing's happening. I see Maria in Saskatchewan is nodding her head there. I've been at workshops in Alberta where they're saying, we're just gonna wait for these agreements to end. So I know that this is critical and that Manitoba is doing some positive things, and we look forward to pushing it to do many more positive things. I'll wrap up by saying that MNPHA is a body by which we would like to be able to express those shared interests that you have as a sector. So I know that each organization may have some uniquenesses, some unique needs, some unique differences, and we would never want to interfere in you advocating directly to Manitoba Housing on those needs. That is your role, your board's role, and do it, because that's where you'll be strong. And as a sector, we have common interests and common needs, and that's where MNPHA comes in. And so when we'll be working with we have an advocacy committee we'll be putting together what we understand to be some common needs. We'll send it to you and saying, like, did we get this right? Please tell us if we didn't. Tell us if there's additional things that we should be advocating for on your behalf, because that is why we exist, among other things. But really building up that capacity of the sector is critical, and this will be a big part of it. So please stay engaged. If you don't get our newsletter, sign up for it. You should have our contact information from this. If you don't, let us know. We'll probably have more sessions as we move forward. And Lido, for folks to say, if they haven't been reached out to by Manitoba Housing yet to ask about interest, you've said there's no formal expression of interest, there's no application, they just email you. Is that right?
Email, phone call.
Email or call Lido.
Yes.
And so expect your phone to be ringing. Yeah, this is an open conversation. There'll be more of them. Thank you so much for attending. We did record this. We'll cut out the beginning and end, but we recorded it. We'll share it back. We'll try to summarize the questions and answers so that you have it. If you have other questions as you go, don't hesitate to send them to us, and we can forward them together to Lido so that we all have the answers. And continue to work on this really important change in the sector going